My name is Jorge Rodriguez Gerada, go by the name Gerada, and I create a lot of different directions in contemporary art, working mostly in public space. I started making art in the early 90s in New York City, basically with the culture jamming and what would later be more kind of what's being called now activist art. So it was an interesting time in New York. It's a New York that doesn't exist anymore, and running around with people like Ron English and that kind of crowd. That whole period of all that work is pretty much summed up in the book No Logo by Naomi Klein. If you go to the culture jamming section in that book, you would follow up a little bit more. I started doing artwork in the public sphere, like in the public space, early on, because I really felt that a lot of what was being taught to me when I went to university just didn't resonate with me. Just didn't make too much sense. I thought a lot of it was superfluous and based on a commercial system. So I wanted to push those boundaries and really just make art transcend a little circuit of where it was created and where it was supposed to be. Barcelona affected my artwork in a really unique way. I went from changing billboards and street signs and things like that in New York City to using party walls, basically the walls that are left over when a building is torn down, and you could still see where the rooms were or where the steps were, the bathrooms. And those surfaces were really interesting to me because they were very, very human surfaces. So to be able to do transparent artwork on top of that was my idea. In the beginning I was trying to think of all different ways of doing it, whether to come up with like a robotic system to print, or transparent paper prints, things like that. But then I came up with the idea of charcoal, and the curious thing was that the charcoal is really, really transparent. Can give me the tones that I wanted without erasing the information below, underneath it. So I was able to blend those two things. So that's really where the beginning of my mural work started, was in Barcelona. The use of sandpaper and charcoal really was based on the fact that I wanted a photograph that could disappear. It was based on the idea of the ephemeral, what is the narrative that's added to the artwork if it fades away, and capturing that. So that was really, it was more like, here's the idea, how do I do it was secondary. So finding the charcoal and the sandpaper was just the process of getting what I wanted. I've always gravitated towards the use of different techniques. I think that innovation is something that really drives me. The search for combining, different innovations, different things that are happening, kind of zeitgeist moments, where you can put things together that really weren't created to be together. So, just like in New York City, I started in advertisements and billboards, and then I went to Barcelona and I started on the murals with the walls. And then I just kept going, so I kept looking for different canvases. So they just keep changing. Now the canvas is large-scale, pieces created on the texture of the topography of a city. So that's something I've always been very curious about. To be able to do the large-scale terrestrial pieces, I've had to be able to unify the use of vector images and high-definition GPS and the contrast of different materials. So you're still trying to create the artwork, but the palette changes, the technique changes, the scale changes. And I just keep going. Like now I'm trying for a completely different, canvas. I'm now shooting for very, very different things. I've always been interested in using the portrait in a way that's very unique, in a way that pushes what portrait art is. I'm not locked in, completely into just doing that, but it's something that I've really liked, and it's a big part of my career. I mean, I also do sculptural work that has more information in it, and it's not just based on the face. And sometimes I even do segments of faces, mouths, eyes in the sculptural pieces, as well as full bodies, adding elements that are that add to the narrative. But the initial use of anonymous people was a way to critique the use of famous people to sell us an idea or some kind of concept. Politicians who no matter what try to sell you an idea or tell you that they're good people even though you know they're probably not. Or the famous person trying to sell you concepts like normalcy or success. So it was critique more than anything else. The project in Washington, D.C. with the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery was really an amazing project. I've learned a lot from each project that I do. The amazing thing from that project was that we got the okay to do it. And usually, I mean, I expected that would have been a 2-year conversation with all the different entities that needed to give the permission, but it ended up being an 8-month one. And everything was really fast-tracked and created quite fast. So in that month of October, we were finished in 30 days. So it it was amazing that the people who came together to make it happen really believed in it, and because of that, it came together quite easily. So a very large construction company on the East Coast of the United States was the one that decided to go ahead and do all the production. The Trust for the National Mall, which is making all the grass along all the monuments and everything green, spending lots of money doing that. The Park Service, which is in Washington, D.C. around the White House, a very intense park service. It's not like, Smokey Bear, and and the whole thing about trees and keeping the animals safe. This was like the no-fly zone, a lot of very serious officers on horseback and in cars and walking, protecting this park. But this is quite a different park from most parks. So it was great to see that they all believed it should happen as well. And I think that you can't do a project like that unless you have people that understand and believe in what's being said. So it was actually an easy project. Yeah, the Terrestrial series started out in 2008 during the Obama election, before he became president. And there was a bunch of dialogue about what was going on, and we had the Bush administration still there. And I think a kind of euphoric moment happened where people were like, oh my God, someone that's outside of the status quo might become president, and on top of everything else, he's like African American, which is a big deal in a country that had slavery yesterday. And the fact that the country still, there was no reconciliation to that whole thing. The amount of minorities in jail in the United States and the racism that you see every day on television, really speaks to the fact that it's not healed, that a lot of the sentiment from the slavery days still exists today. So to have a black president was, something that was important on many levels. But on top of that, there was a large part of the world population looking for a hero. And so I created a piece called Expectation in Barcelona. That was really to talk about the fact that, yeah, it's great that this can happen, but it's really bad to look for a hero to come and save us. Your expectations will drop. And plus, if you have one hero and that hero is gone, all of a sudden everything falls apart. So I wanted to create a piece where I could actually talk about that as an artist. Here are these concepts, here are, commercials saying like, oh, that he's like a rock star, like, like Britney Spears, and it's just bringing it all to the banal. And I wanted to raise the level of discourse within that election year. And with this piece, Expectation, I was able to do that. So the scale of the piece can only really be done at a large scale when what you're saying feels and is important. You know what I mean? It would be absurd to just do a pretty picture or a nice design without any substance behind it. I feel that that's just not necessary. It would be just as crass as doing a big McDonald's logo or something. You know, it just makes no sense for me. So that was the first one, and then from there it just progressed. You know, more projects, different things, different ways of doing it. Another piece in Amsterdam, another piece in Belfast, and then the other piece in Washington. Now I have another one coming up in Aalborg, and they keep changing. And I like to continue adding these elements of innovation. So the next ones that I'm doing are going to be even, you know, more interesting and different. How they work, how they're created, how they're viewed, how they're experienced on the ground. So really, really pushing towards that. And the amazing thing about the Terrestrial series is that it opened up a whole direction for me in monumental sculpture, the pieces on paper, just like, it just really, you know, process takes you in really interesting ways if you let it. So that was a really wonderful thing that came out of that. Not only was I able to say important things, like for instance, the way I work is I have to believe it really from the heart, right? So, I mean, that might sound silly or full of, you know, but when you do that, you're able to take on anything that happens to make sure it goes through because you truly believe in it. So it's not a commercial venture only. It's not just an aesthetic venture. It's really something that you think should exist. So with that as a base, like for example, in Belfast, Northern Ireland, that little girl making a wish, I don't tell this often, but just so you understand the concept of how I work, I needed that little girl to be already special in a kind of like a spiritual sense. So the base of the piece already has something that's really powerful, but no one really needs to know it, just me. And that little girl is one of the first little girls born into a Protestant and Catholic family. So her existence already is special, and then her making a wish for a future adds to that on a kind of spiritual, very sort of profound level. So that's how I start the piece. And so when the piece comes together, it has this power to it that people sense, but they don't really know what it is. And I know that, you know, some people will be like, oh, that's, you know, it's bullets, as you say here. But I found that if I have that base in everything that I do, it transcends me. The piece gets to a point where it's no longer me making the artwork, it's a whole city making the artwork. So when that happens, it's absolutely amazing. You know? So I do not do these large-scale pieces unless I have that first. Like the piece in Washington, D.C., they asked me to present something, and I said, let me think about it, and I'll get back to you and I'll present you an idea. And when I came up with the idea of photographing a lot of different ethnic backgrounds of people visiting the mall, the National Mall, and choosing an age range, and then, you know, being able to photograph like 50 young men from all over the world who are American, and combining that face and making that, of course, that ethnic-looking face at that large scale in Washington, in a moment where that country is living through so much hardship with racism, is, you know, it's an important comment. It's an important piece. And not all the artwork that I create is just based on that kind of social commentary, but the large-scale pieces, when they're created, yes, they have to have that. If not, it's just banal crap. So I've always been interested in the you know, different technologies and innovations that I can bring into what I do. mean, I still do a lot of the old Renaissance styles, or even charcoal goes back to before written history. We have paints and everything. It's all the regular material. But then if you can add to that, the use of point clouds when you finish a piece, you can see it in virtual reality, or the use of GPS satellite equipment. Just keep going. I mean, I just keep taking it so I could build it into the creation of a new paintbrush. So I'm always looking for that new direction. And now I'm really diving into Rhinoceros and Grasshopper, which are two programs that work together for 3D design, and using other things that I've used in the past, and plasticine and everything else, just to come together to create new directions in contemporary art. So it's a never-ending search. I think that now what's happened is that I'm consolidating more of my aesthetic. I'm not all over the place as much with different styles and the experimentation, and I'm really now just more focused on certain things that I want to do. I think that just comes with maturity. I'm happy that it happened now, me with being more of an adult artist and being younger, because it allows me to not have been pigeonholed into a style that I couldn't break out of later, in career-wise. So I'm really happy with the way everything's gone. I think that the amount of different projects and all the travel and everybody I've met around the world and stuff has added to where I am now. So when I do the large-scale pieces, the coordination is an interesting aspect, but I find that what I end up really trying to do is to break the projects down into a timeline and make sure that everything stays on schedule. And the good thing is that I'm good at managing through everything. I know what everything needs to look like and when it should be done and when there's a problem. So I think with that, if you just keep an eye on those kind of things, the projects flow fairly quickly. And also, it's very, very important that even if you do projects based on volunteers or people who want to come on and help in any other way, in-kind donations or whatever, it's important that the artist has the final call on things, and that's one thing I explained from the beginning. It's like, okay, we can all get together, we can all do this project, or yeah, I'm doing it for the Smithsonian, but it's my piece. It's not your piece, or so it has to follow my guidelines and how it has to be done, and by doing that, it gets completed on time, because I understand it really, really well. I can see when something's wrong. I can see when something's behind schedule, and that just makes it all work pretty well. The important thing is to make sure that the different parts of it have team leaders that are really good. But to do that, the one thing I do ask for is that small team of team leaders is part of the project, meaning that we're always meeting every morning and every evening, and they're not detached. They're paid for by the project to work together, because when you have it separate, it's not the same kind of dialogue. So I've really found that a small group of people are really what makes it get completed. I like to keep evolving in what I do. There's certain artists that have done that successfully, where it's not just a cookie cutter style. Like I could never be a Mark Rothko, doing the same painting basically for like your whole life. That just wouldn't make it feasible for me. But the whole idea of continuing to stay within what interests you, your aesthetic, but to continue creating different ways of creating is something that really interests me. Now I'm playing with the whole thing of drones and some path analysis and all sorts of different things coming in. Parametric design, it's curious, huh? Because when I started with the culture jamming, it was when I was doing all that, it was innovation then. It was like the fact that you could print and you can cut vinyl with the same fonts and stick it on stuff. So when I was changing billboards, it wasn't just sort of like going in and hacking it, and just spraying it, whatever, splashing paint. It was changing fonts at this right scale, and the whole thing. So there was also since then like the use of technology. It's just something that carried through. I think that what I always tried to do was, even when I was doing the charcoal portraits, would seem very sort of traditional. How they faded away was the important thing. Curiously enough, a lot of the let's say like social media kind of audience is just so battered with imagery and the quickness of it all, that there's very little time to delve into an artwork or why it was done. Oh, it's a portrait, and that's it. Oh, it's fading away, that's it. And like never a contemplation of what it's like to create something so difficult on a surface that's impossible, with a material that's like really thin little sticks, using 300 of them just to let it fade away. And they'll never, 95% of the people that see it, like until I explain it, they're like, oh, because they won't take the time to actually contemplate it themselves. And that's the world we're living in, which is okay, it's fine. I think that it's a different thing that I'm looking for than what most people are looking for in what's now called street art or whatever. I mean, you got to understand, when I started, there was no like street art movement. I mean, yeah, you had like, Basquiat and Keith Haring and stuff like that, but it wasn't like what it is today. And all I really was caring about was working in the urban space. It was about questioning how urban space is used, why do you create artwork, and where do you place it, and who sees it? It's that was my game. I didn't come from graffiti. I came from culture jamming. So it's a thing I don't fit neatly into, and quite frankly, something I'm not that sure that I like the tag. I'd rather just say, I'm an artist that sometimes works in the streets. There's a small city in Navarra, Spain, by Pamplona. It's called Tudela, Navarra, which I've sort of adopted a little bit as sort of my foster hometown. Made a lot of very, very good friends there. Spend some time there almost every month. And with a friend of mine, we came together and created Avant-Garde Tudela, which is just this mural festival that's pretty much had like all the big names go there and create pieces. And it's been this little festival that could, it's just sort of not trying to be anything special, but the people who go there get blown away because of the amount of murals by like really, really big names and really great artists. So it's a curious project. And this year we just did another festival. It had stopped for a couple of years because of the crisis and everything, and now it's back with a vengeance. And we brought down the amount of artists at a time. Now it's 3, and we went up in scale and visibility throughout this beautiful little city. So it's filled with storks and 12th century cathedral, and I mean it's just the food's amazing. It's like right next to the Ebro River, with a Gothic stone bridge that crosses the river that they had to blow up to stop Napoleon's troops from coming in. I mean, like really all this, it just doesn't stop, this place. So I really became enamored with it, and the fact that the festival is now going again, full steam ahead, is really, really something quite nice. And this year we had Franco Fasoli come by, who did a humongous piece. based on the history of the place and the fact of the three religions, you know, that used to be there. That, of course, Spain, you know, so it's like the Muslim, the Jewish, and the Christian, you know. And he had a horseman, you know, holding up the book, you know. And, really, really great piece. Well, I got to tell you that this, if anybody ever gets a chance to go to this little place, you know, if nothing else, you know, the food. You get blown away by the quality of the food. So that you enjoy murals, and then your pinchos and all the other stuff is just over the top. I'm always working on different projects and, you know, things that are there in the works. And you know, next year is going to be, you know, busy. Got a project in Beirut, Lebanon. Have another project in Aalborg, Denmark. So that's going to be a big one. And something coming up in San Antonio, Texas. And I don't think I should take anything else on the way things are going, because those three are so big that it would be insane to take anything else on. So even though I had slated two solo exhibitions, one in Paris and one in Barcelona, I'm probably not going to do those. I'm just going to focus on these other three and push those exhibitions back a year. So yeah, it gets really interesting really quick. Yeah, when the schedules, you know, start getting to where they are, it's really a gift. You know, it's based on the amount of work that you put in and stuff like that. So it's really nice that it's happening. I mean, I've just been invited to go to China, to go to Pakistan, to like just keep, you know, for the murals, and I just can't do it anymore. And it's funny because the murals, the mural circuit, the festival circuit, is fun. I mean, it's great to do those projects and to meet such cool people. You know, but I'm really more focused now on this other thing. You know, the fact that the projects keep coming in, the ones that I plant seeds for, because those are the ones I want, and they actually, you know, germinate, grow, and become something quite big, is fantastic. So I'd rather do those than just get the email in, hey, can you come to the festival and stuff. It's a little bit more interesting for me right now. So next year's gonna be cool. If resources were no issue, I would be creating a lot more artwork based on things that I think deserve attention. You know, from children living in garbage dumps of electronic waste, burning toxic materials to get copper, you know, to, you know, fracking in the United States, to like, I mean, I would be doing projects like that, like really big projects, so these issues and the people working to make them better get more attention. I think that's a good thing to do with the ability that I have to do large scale pieces. I mean, I also would like to do a lot of pieces that are just based on positive things as well. And I mean, but yeah, I would have more freedom to help out, you know, people who are fighting at the front lines on things that are important. Being able to actually do work that helps create a synergy to be able to actually change laws, you know, that are affect us and our future generations. So things like that. You know, take art outside of just the banality of it being a commodity. So, you know, making money in art and art as commodity is fine, you know, but it'd be great if there was more money to transcend that.